if people took away just one thing, what would you want them to take away?
To just go out and be generous. Honestly, I think that there are absolutely no boundaries. Integrate generosity into your wealth strategy. Figure out a plan that works for you, that fuels your joy, and just make it a core part of your life rather than an afterthought. Really dive into putting this into practice and making sure that this is a part of your everyday life.
Welcome to the Child Free Wealth Podcast, hosted by Bree and Dr. J, certified financial planner. Here we discuss life and finances as it relates to being child-free. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Please consult your advisor before implementing any ideas heard on this podcast.
Hey, Child Free Wealth listeners. Today, we're going to dig into philanthropy, giving. How do you make an impact with your time, your life, your money, all that fun? And I've got an awesome expert for this. So Alison Patterson comes in from Patterson Philanthropic Advisors. I always have trouble with that word. Don't mind me. But she comes out of a background of working in kind of this giving and nonprofit world, but she's helping folks figure out kind of what is their impact? Where do they want to go? How do you give with a warm hand versus a cold hand? Like, how do we make an impact? And we had a great conversation, ran a meeting recently, and I was like, you got to join on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's exciting to be here.
Yeah, it's great to dig in. And tell me a little bit about kind of the work you do. Like, you're a giving coach, essentially?
Yes, it is a different kind of space because most of the people who do what I do work with ultra high net worth clients, like people who are giving away lots and lots of dollars. And because you mentioned that I had been working in the non-for-profit world for over 25 years, what I saw was just lots and lots of generous humans wanting to do good out there in the world. They were needing some strategy. They wanted some tips and pointers. And I believed that they deserved to be able to have that just the same as, folks with millions of dollars. I broke out on my own and now I help everyday people, everyday change makers put strategy and intention behind the generosity that they want to put out there in the world.
What do you see as like the biggest challenge? When somebody comes to you, what's either the problem or kind of the issue?
Primarily, I think a lot of times it's overwhelm or freeze state. They feel that they don't have enough to really make an impact, or they don't understand how what they're doing already sort of aligns with who they are as a human. They are in a lot of ways having the same kind of issues that, you have when you're trying to build your budget or, when you're trying to think about your life in general, which is, okay, how does this fit? And I only have limited resources, whether it's my time or my money or how I use my voice. How am I going to use that and use that in a way that really brings the good that is mine to do in the world out and free?
And I hear you. And I think one of the challenges, people look at it just as like a money thing. And look, you're not going to give enough money to get your name on the side of the building. I mean, let's just be real. There's a price for that. I mean, is it like a comparison problem of like, well, I can't give as much, or how do you see that?
Well, I do think that there is a comparison problem. I also believe that we are living in this moment of scarcity, right? And again, that's what I love about your book and how you work with your child-free clients is you really talk to them about building this life that is theirs. And it doesn't have to be about not enough. It can be about, well, I have exactly what I need. And also I have the ability to give to others or impact others or create this community that is mine. And it's a really different shift. I mean, that's one of the things that draws me to you, because whether you're working with someone who is child-free or not, we're living in this moment of, I don't have enough. And we all have more than enough if we can just identify what that is and then lean into it.
We can't talk about this without like talking about the giant issue. We're in a really political year, a lot of issues with folks. And I do hear folks go, well, really, if I do help in this area, is it going to make a difference? How do you handle that?
Well, first of all, I ask them a question. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? Because making a difference is unique to each and every person. The world's going to tell me that I'm going to have to fund 5 scholarships for kids in schools, or I'm going to have to make sure 10 kids eat, or whatever that is that the world's going to tell me. How I approach it is I'm like, oh, okay, well then help me understand. What does that mean to you? Because it means something different for each and every person. If it's going to make a difference, then maybe making a difference for you is knowing and understanding that the local food pantry is out there and open for the folks who are losing their jobs, regardless of how you feel about what's going on in our world right now. There are people and issues and our environment being impacted. For good or bad. How do you feel about that, and what does that mean to you?
Hey, Child Free Wealth listeners, it's Bree. I highly encourage you to schedule a Child Free Wealth checkup. During this time, you're going to get a couple of forms to fill out that include your life and financial plan. We'll review them, and then we're going to have a meeting and go through them with you. We're going to give you some advice and things to work on, and talk through things to make your finances simpler so your life can be amazing. You can schedule yours by going to our website, childfreewealth.com, and clicking the Schedule Now button.
Yeah, and I'm with you. And if we take the food example, and my wife does work in that area, and some days it's like, look, there are so many issues. Like, am I really going to even be a drop in this bucket? And my answer is always, you made a difference to somebody.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
You may not have made it to everybody. You're never gonna cure hunger,
right?
But you can make a difference.
Yes, that's it. But most people, they see that they're just overwhelmed by and when we can, we take it back a step again and we say, oh, wait a minute. And some people, they need to know, they need to understand. I helped 5 people. Because that is important to them. Great. I love that. I always try and say, figure out your own measuring stick. Because when you understand that for yourself, then you have the ability to sort of be like, oh, okay, that's it. For some people, they can drop off food at the food pantry and know that that food pantry is being run well. They have great leadership. They're doing great work in the community. They have confidence that they just drop that food off and they know it's going to go to the person who needs it the most.
That's fair. And I think part of the challenge is you have to look at what you have to give. So I was having a conversation with a client and very church oriented. That's where her passion was. Awesome. And we started having a conversation about giving. And she was tithing and giving her amount, but she's like, I said, would you like to give more time? She said, no, that's not where my skills are. I'm actually better at making money. And she's like, I could go work and make more money to give to them and have a bigger impact that way, which is not always the way people think about it.
Mm-hmm. No. I mean, again, it is identifying the resource that you have. That's one of the things that I try and do with folks because, right now, my most valuable resource is my expertise. I help people all the time with my expertise in the field, but that's not money. But you can leverage that and take that beyond anything there is. So it's being able to own that and to know that and to understand that has value.
But when you say value, it's like, I'm going to argue, it doesn't always have to be measured.
No. I get it. That is a word. But value is also meaning. It's also that joy, that intentionality behind it. So I guess that's maybe more what I mean by valuable.
Well, I mean, we all get to figure out a choice of value. I mean, I often talk about it as impact, kind of what's that second line of your obituary say when you're on your way out? What's that impact you make? I think the challenge is if you're one of those people that has always measured everything, I almost feel like you're setting yourself up for failure. And they're like, oh, I've got to hit this goal number, whatever, versus I just want to make this impact. I want to live a valuable life. I want to do whatever it is that matters for my impact. And sometimes it's hard to kind of give up on the hard and fast numbers.
I don't disagree. I work with folks all the time. And honestly, I actually lean into that. If that is still the way that your measuring stick is going to work, then okay, let's do it. I was working with a client and in fact, they were giving a transformative gift to an organization. And I always kind of like to say, hey, would you consider just giving it to their annual fund? Because this was a project-based gift. And that client said, nope, this needs to be part of their capital project. I don't want it to go to their bottom line, to their annual giving. And of course, for someone who used to work in not-for-profit, that was really hard for me. What I know is that organization used that, and they are now strategically I visited with them in January, and they are, for the first time in their history, in a really great monetary space. Like, they're starting the year better than they ever could. That client really helped me to see that, yeah, I would have loved to have had them help, with the annual giving in that moment. But, that's not how they wanted to measure it. They understood what their impact was going to be through that gift.
Yeah. And by the way, there's a whole bunch of nonprofit speak in there I want to pull apart. When you're giving money and who you give it, like, you can designate some things, others. And there's always the kind of the weird stories. One of my favorite is kind of the librarian who worked at the school forever, donates a bunch of money, and then her money's used for like a scoreboard at a football game. Like, that doesn't fit who she is, so sometimes it makes sense to say, all right, this is for this purpose. Sometimes it's more generic, like more general fund, like help pull apart. You had a bunch of terms in there of like, how do you give that money?
Yes. There's a lot of question right now. So if you just go into what we call trust-based philanthropy. I trust the organization. I'm going to give them my dollars, and I trust them to do well by that. And they are going to put that in their budget. It's just like any other company. They have to pay their rent. They have to keep the lights on, because if they aren't doing those things and paying their employees, they can't do the programming. There are projects within an organization that they work on. So maybe they are specifically teaching teenagers how to drive, teenagers in communities that don't have that resource. They have a driving program, or they have a program where they're teaching youth to fix cars as a trade. So that's a program. And then there's capital giving, where, like you said, you're going to give them money, they're going to build something, and you're going to maybe put your name on the side of that building.
And do you have a preference of where people give?
I prefer where my client brings my client the most joy. I don't. Now, having worked in the nonprofit industry for as long as I did, I sure would love for people to just give those dollars and trust that organization is doing with those dollars, using those dollars well. There's a lot of skepticism out there around folks that has happened because some big organizations, have big overhead, but most nonprofits, they are working on the skinniest margin. And most humans who are working in that field are not making a lot. They're not making millions of dollars. When you give to that small organization or even that mid-sized organization, knowing that you're giving and you're just trusting them to do the right thing, if you've looked into the leadership, if you've kind of done a little due diligence around that, that's where I prefer. But again, my job isn't to tell my client. My job is to say, let's figure it out for you. Let's figure out what's going to bring you joy, what's meaningful to you, and then let's go get it.
Yeah, I think this figuring out charities you trust or kind of like can give money to is a challenge. So I have a client, and really interesting approach what he's doing. He's got a bunch of money to give at the end, but he's like, all right, let me give $10,000, $25,000, a couple of these charities and see what they do with it. See how they engage with it, see what the communication looks like. And it's really interesting. He's tried a few different places, and one or two of them I've never given them another dollar. Some have done well. Another kind of test he did, which was really interesting. This was actually a veteran services organization. He called up their line and said, can I talk to a human? And couldn't get a human. I'm like, well, that's a bad sign. But how do you figure out kind of who you could trust to give money to or like guides or like cutoffs or something like that?
You can talk to your local community foundation. There is GuideStar. There are lots of online things. My difficulty with the online sort of approaches, they just show you dollars. And being a money person, you understand that what bucket you put something in might not tell you the real story. I love what you said about your client because they're testing the waters, they're making a call. I had a client recently who he went through and because I don't start at how, I start at why. Much like you, like let's start with the end in mind. We go through a process of, coming up with a focus statement. And he identified empowerment, read an article in a newspaper, started learning a little bit more about the organization, just like your client, signed up for the newsletter, and then made a call to the development officer later. But within, I don't know, it was less than a year's time that he was making a 5-figure gift to that organization. For that organization, it was transformative. And for him, he's an accountant. He was like, this is a great ROI. I think that this is a great ROI. I was like, I think it's a great ROI too. Are you excited about it? And he said, yeah.
Well, and I think part of it is that you have to understand why you're doing it, but you also have to understand what impact you want to make. Do you want to be part of the organization? Do you want to give anonymously? Do you want to be part of their board? Like, there's lots of different decisions. But I think at the core of that is this question of like, should I give with a warm hand or a cold hand? Like, should I give it while I'm alive versus after I pass? And with my clients, I spend a lot of time on giving while you're alive. Let's be real, from a financial standpoint, that's where you get tax breaks, but also because you get to see that impact and be part of it. You not only get to give some money or give your time, but you get to be part of it, see what's going on. And most good nonprofits are good at showing you, here's what we did, here's the impact, sharing the stories, introducing you to people that like where you can be part of it. But how do you look at giving at the end of life versus during life?
Well, like you, I prefer for people to give during their lifetime. Because again, what I also then talk to my clients about, if you're giving during your lifetime, again, it's that measuring stick. I also encourage them to communicate with the organization because that organization can't read your mind and they don't know what's important to you. They don't know how you want to be stewarded. So as a development officer, someone who was raising money, I was hoping that my call once a year or this or that was what was really going to help that person understand the impact they were making. What I encourage my people who are giving, with a warm hand is let's get really intentional about how we're communicating with that organization. Now, if they want to wait and that, again, that's important to them, what I also do is say, let's get really granular around what this means. Yeah, I love that you're going to give to your church. Churches are in distress right now. And there are churches out there that have large endowments, but are still handcuffed by the fact that their endowment is only giving 5% to the church when the church really needs more than that to actually function. And that you can use that example for any organization. Really being granular around, if you prefer to wait, and that's fine, then let's be real specific around what that means to you, how you want that to used. Maybe you want it spent down. So maybe you're giving $25,000 and you want that spent down over 5 years. Or you want that to go in perpetuity and make sure that that money is giving to the food program at your church. But really making sure that we aren't just saying, let's give it to this organization.
Yeah, and I ran into an interesting case. I had somebody who was going to give everything after they passed, and they have this great local charity, great community event, like love the community. They love this group. And I looked at what they were going to be giving in their estate, and it was probably about 2 times as much of the annual budget of that organization or their annual raise of that organization. And I said, you got to watch out because you can actually mess up an organization by giving too much if they don't have a structure to manage it, a process. And my client was like, how in the hell is that possible? But I'm like, they just don't have the infrastructure to handle, in this case, this multi-million dollars coming in. Like, you're just asking for things to go bad.
Well, in fact, the example that I gave you around the client who was giving to building something, that was the case with this organization. They really didn't have the capacity in that moment to really make the most of that gift. Now, because that they have a great board, they have a great executive director, and, I was working alongside with my client coming along, saying, okay, because I was able to help my client not be impatient with the process, right? Because they wanted to see this thing being built. And this organization just wasn't quite ready to do that. In fact, by giving them the time that they needed to do it well, they came out infinitely better, this organization did, and was able to, again, leverage this money in a way that neither the organization nor the person who gave these dollars could ever have imagined.
Yeah. And I think the hard part is, like, your heart can be in the right place, but just it doesn't get executed. There's just some scale issues around nonprofits. And this is where we go into the crazy land where now people are getting millions of dollars of salary. No. Like, we're not talking about that, but like, you have to have that right match. And one of the things I've been talking to my clients about is sometimes the right match, the right way to do it is to be involved and even like join the board. What do you think about people joining the boards or the organization that drives it?
Oh, absolutely. I think any way that you can get involved in a granular level. My daddy taught me, he was like, when I was building a business, you work on the ground floor and you know the business upside down. Well, that's what you do when you volunteer at a not-for-profit organization. That's what you do when you join the board. I think it's really important not to come in and assume that you know how to do things in a not-for-profit organization, because a lot of people do that and they think that they can come in and run it like a business or revamp things. And it doesn't work that way. They aren't structured in the same way. They're just specific ways that they're different. So I would encourage people to sit and listen. And I do coach folks all the time on joining boards and coach them through that first year, so that, the first thing is like, okay, where are they seating you? What's their onboarding process? Let's dig into their financials again, so that I can show my client, when they're talking about this line item, this is what they're really saying. Because, it's always a translation, especially if those kinds of numbers aren't something that you're familiar with. A lot of people come in and that's just, those kinds of numbers aren't what they're familiar with, or even how that organization reports out those numbers.
That's fair. When you're looking at organizations, you've been on the development side, and it's kind of interesting because some of the development officers are really good at what they do, and some of them, it feels kind of like they're just begging for your money. And like, how do you work with them? And the reason I'm asking is I came out of healthcare, and I was with an organization that literally, if somebody had money, they would put them on a VIP list at the hospital and like get them better care and then go beg for the money from them. And it just felt bad. Like, how do you work with the development office? Like, I've worked with some development office. I'm like, yeah, I'm never giving you money because I just don't like you as a development person. But how do you do that?
Well, so just so you know, I get it. I totally get it. Happened when that sort of pressure, at least for me, happened. A lot of times it happened because I was being pressured by the organization to ask for dollars from someone when I knew that it wasn't aligned with their values. It wasn't really aligned with where they wanted to go. But I was being asked to put you in a pipeline and move you forward, right? So if you gave me $500, I was supposed to ask you for $1,000 next year. And that was really out of alignment with who I was and how because I got to know my people. I mean, I could tell you everybody that I was working with, and I knew what they cared about. And I could say, you know what, they're not going to give to this organization because I know that they really love and they, their focus is over here in our community. What I try and do, and probably the first thing that I work with my clients with is, again, when we have this focus statement, when we have this real clear yes, it gives us a real clear no. If I can communicate well why I'm giving you those dollars, and if I can say no in a direct and kind way, then, those are the skills that I need or my clients need. Now, I also can, for those clients who want me to, I can be the bad guy. And I have. Let me tell you, I've called development officers and I'm like, hey, look, my client is still getting your emails. And we've talked about the fact that they want to receive this and this and this. This is, and I can guarantee you they will be happy and joyful and they will continue to give you money, but I need them off this marketing list. I would say advocate for yourself when that happens. But again, that's a role that I have played.
Yeah. And I think there's like the good and the bad. So like my wife and I, we give to the local zoo. We do a lot of events. We did a 5K recently and there's like the night event. And I like being on their mailing list and we look at some of the stuff and like, yeah, we'll go to that one. But nobody's calling me. Nobody's hounding me. Nobody, like, if I'm interested, I'm interested. If I'm not, I'm not. And that works for me. For others, it's a different relationship. But I think, when you're looking at giving, like, the last thing I want is a used car salesman coming here to begging me for my money.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I completely agree. And I agree that is one of the reasons why people are hesitant to give more and why they are overwhelmed, because they don't want to get on somebody's list. Even when I'm helping someone to set up a donor advised fund, one of the things I say is, do you want this fund? How are you going to name this fund? Because in my home, we actually have 2 donor advised funds. One is in a name that nobody will ever know who that is. And one is in our name. And we've had these funds for many, many years. So it's important to kind of know your style and how that is. But again, I think that's why people, they don't want to get on a list because they don't want to get called.
Hey listeners, like what you're hearing? Don't miss a thing. Sign up for the Child Free Wealth newsletter for weekly tips, tools, and podcast updates. Head to childfreewealth.com/newsletter to get on the list.
I love that idea of having different funds and, one's anonymous, one's not, like, name it after your favorite dog. I mean, whatever it is, like,
Yeah.
It works. So one last kind of weird question, and this might be a little bit outside your area, but we've been having discussions with clients on the debate between giving to nonprofits and giving to kind of for-profits that are for a cause, kind of like the B Corps of the world, the venture philanthropy type world, and which is more sustainable. And it's been a really interesting debate. Do you have any kind of thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I am so excited that you are having those conversations, because my thoughts on that are there is space for both. And there is reason and there is need for both. Again, I was working for a not-for-profit and in fact, I was asking for money, but then there was also an impact fund that went along with that. But what that also does is it gives people a place to plug in. And again, if just donating dollars is not your place, I mean, like, put together an impact generator, right? And like, let's just start funding those things. I encourage my clients to think about GoFundMe's and those kinds of aspects of giving in the same way in terms of our overall generosity and our overall generosity budget. Just because it's not going to a not-for-profit doesn't mean that it isn't part of our overall generosity plan. I am so excited that you're having those conversations, and I'm really excited that people are learning more about them and understanding them better.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges, like, we talk about taxes, whatever, and there's a difference between nonprofits and GoFundMe. Like, okay, fine. But if you really care about it, we can do it. Like one of the ones I'm a big fan of is the random acts of kindness. Having $100 in your pocket, and if you see somebody in need, give them $100, it can change your life. I'm not taking receipts. I'm not counting anything. Like just, it does it. And I just don't think we think enough about how much impact that can have.
Right. Well, in our house, we call it the inspiration money, and you can be inspired over anything. Now, the only strings that are attached to those, and that's in our cash flow, right? So like, that's how we work that out. The only strings that are attached to that is you have to talk about it around the dinner table that night to say, this is what inspired me. And I want, because again, it's about that moment that spoke to you. It's about sharing that. It's about creating a connection with someone else that you are close to and why that was important.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is there's a lot of ways to give and you can get your impact. But I'm going to ask you the hardest question. So you talked about a lot of stuff today. You've got a lot of ideas. If people took away just one thing, what would you want them to take away?
That to just go out and be generous. Honestly, I think that there are absolutely no boundaries. Integrate generosity into your wealth strategy. Figure out a plan that works for you, that fuels your joy, and just make it a core part of your life rather than an afterthought. I mean, really dive into putting this into practice and making sure that this is a part of your everyday life.
That's great. We actually make it part of the core financial plan. We put in the process. So if people want to reach you, kind of work with you, how do they find you?
I am at Patterson-advisors.com, or you can reach me at Allison, Alison, at Patterson-advisors.com. And honestly, if your folks are just curious, I do what I call a dreaming session. And so it's just call me and let's dream a little bit about what this could look like. And that's always free because that's how I give back to the world. And that's how I'm generous to the world.
Well, that's awesome. We'll include links in the show notes, and thanks for coming.
Great. Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving a rating or review. We'd love to keep the conversation going. Please let us know your thoughts wherever comments are available, or email us at media@childfreewealth.com. To stay up to date, find and follow Child Free Wealth on social media. If you're interested in working with us, learn more by visiting our website, childfreewealth.com. We'll see you next time.